Hi, it's me, Melly, and this is another intuitive logo design concept sketch debriefing, where I go into the concept and do a lot of sketches to solidify the concept behind your brand new logo before we move into the very time-intensive, graphics piece where we're actually building the graphical components, playing around with color, with arrangement, with shading, with typography, and for step one, which is what the intuitive logo concept sketch is, we really narrow down the meaning and the depth behind the piece before we take too many steps in the wrong direction. So this concept sketch is a little bit different from my traditional intuitive concept sketches in that my client came to me, one, with an existing logo, and two, with some specific imagery that really calls to her for her logo, and because she already has a developed audience and there are certain symbols that are very important to her and her brand. So what I did was I started out with the sketches, and then I photographed the sketches, brought them into Adobe Illustrator, outlined them so that I could play around with some different arrangements and even a little bit of typography, which isn't the final typography, but it's a start, right? A starting point from which my client will have a foundation to develop feedback in terms of the direction for the actual final graphic development. And then we do rounds of revision within step two as well. But for step one, we've got sketches, we've got some typography, and a couple of layouts that feel very impactful. And hopefully my client will agree. So I'm going to flip you around and go through the sketches and the Illustrator work. So here were my initial kinds of sketches. This could still be a potential layout, the idea of, a happy pit bull type dog ringing the bell, sounding the call, essentially, for the Philly dog. This was my first very rough sketch, having the dog behind the bell. Again, I played around with kind of an upside down dog, and then I thought, maybe that wouldn't be understandable enough, once it becomes a graphic, but that was another more playful approach. This was another concept, and this was kind of developed into a more organized layout in Illustrator. Then again, I was, playing around with a little more detail in this sketch, playing around with a little bit more with the proportions of this sketch, taking it into another sketch so that I could photograph this, without my scribbling and shading, and bring it into Illustrator and play a little bit more. So this was kind of the development of those sketches. Again, if my client really likes the playfulness of this arrangement, this is something that we could develop further in step two instead of one of the other ones. But I'm going to take you right over to Illustrator and show you what's going on over there. So this is within Adobe Illustrator, and this was taking, the sketch where I just brought it in here, really roughly outlined it, and then was playing around with some typography behind. The idea of having, the dog and the bell as an accessory to the type. You could use either one on its own. And then scrolling down, so you can see I was playing around with, different scripts, a different arrangement, which felt too much like the dog wearing a dress to me, so I ended up taking the feet out for this concept. And then scrolling down here, I was playing around with a little bit different, keeping the script for dog, and then having the pit bull dog with the paw up on the bell, and then making this kind of one unified layout right there. So these are really the kind of two concepts that I've developed a little bit further. Again, if my client prefers something in the sketches, in the more rough sketches, then we take that feedback and that information into step two, where we begin really delving in and spending, the hours of time that it takes to create that final concept with the colors, with the shading, with the layout, and then creating the final print and web files. So thanks for watching. I really love being able to give this kind of in-depth look behind the scenes at the process, especially because over my 20 years of design experience, I've finally really honed the process so that it lights me up. And from the feedback I've gotten from my clients, it really lights them up as well because they feel like a part of the conversation and they really get to understand all that goes into the development of the piece. Which makes it a lot more satisfying in the end as well to be part of that process and to know that there's so much more going on than, searching the internet for some random clip art and throwing it all together. Vomiting clip art, as I like to say. So hopefully you enjoyed this, and I will talk to you next time.